What's up, everyone? It's Brent with ChinaExpatLife.com, where we help you succeed in China. Today, I want to talk about the top 6 things you should consider before moving to China. Ready? Let's go. All right. The first thing you're going to need to consider before moving to China is getting a job. That's right, a job. Lazy millennials, you just don't like to work, do you? And I know you might be thinking, but Brent, my parents are so rich. Why do I need a job? I can just go there for free and they will pay for everything. Well, sorry to break it to you, but it doesn't necessarily work like that, because if you want to live long-term in China, you're going to need a long-term visa. The best way to get a long-term visa is through an employer who can offer you a long-term visa. But be careful. There's a lot of scams out there, so you got to be pretty picky when looking for a job. Another way you could get a long-term visa is if you're a student. Maybe you're interested in coming and learning Chinese. For you, there will be a lot of options for language exchange programs at different universities in China. You just got to look into that. And then there's one other way you could get a business visa. So the biggest issue with getting a business visa is even if you get a multiple entry visa, which means you can come and go as much as you want, you can typically stay no longer than 60 days at a time in China, which means every 60 days you're going to have to fly out of China and then come back into China again. But be careful. Even if you have a business visa, that doesn't mean you're allowed to work for a Chinese company and get paid by a Chinese company while you're living in China. That is a big no-no. A lot of people do that, but if you get caught, there's a good chance you'll get deported. Okay, the second thing you're going to need to think about before moving to China is the food. The food here is amazing, and each region in China has their own different type of food. Some is salty, some is sweet, some is bland. I don't know, there's something for everyone here in China. But if you're a picky eater, or maybe you have some extreme food allergy, maybe you should think long and hard before moving to China, because you're never quite sure what you're really eating. There has been so many times when we're out eating and then I have to ask my wife, so what kind of meat is this? And she says, I don't know. What kind of animal did this come from? Maybe pig? Another thing. Special orders aren't really a thing in China like they are in the US. I spent about 5 years of my life working in restaurants in the US, and I can tell you firsthand, Americans love to customize their food. The problem is in China, usually there's a huge language barrier, and another thing is usually local people just order whatever's on the menu, and whatever comes out is what they eat, and they don't really complain about it too much. This could be a problem if you're a vegetarian. I have some vegetarian friends that live in Shanghai, and I think they do okay in the big city finding vegetarian food, but at a typical Chinese restaurant, you're going to get a lot of meat broth in the different soups. Even if you say no meat, there's a good chance you're going to get meat. So a lot of vegetable dishes are cooked with meat. If you have a pretty bad food allergy, um, yeah. If I had a bad food allergy, I probably wouldn't be in Asia. If you have bad food allergies, you're going to have a bad time in China. All that being said, if you live in a city like Beijing or Shanghai or Shenzhen or Guangzhou, you'll probably be able to find something you like to eat. If it's an international food, it might be a little expensive, but you can probably find you can find most things in the big cities. Now, if you live in a small town like where I live now, You're if you can't eat the local food, you're probably not going to eat. So the third thing you're going to have to think about before moving to China is the cultural differences. There are a ton of cultural differences in China. China is basically way different than most other countries in the world, and you will notice it quickly after you step off the plane. There's a lot of different things in China that are hard to get used to, especially if you have a face that is non East Asian in appearance. You're going to get a lot of people staring at you. Even in big cities like Shanghai, people will stare. If you go outside of the big international cities, you'll have crowds of people staring at you. And if you like attention, China is the place for you. But if you get a little uncomfortable with someone staring at you from across the room while you're eating, China's going to be a little weird. I've been here for 5 years and I'm still not 100% used to it. I accept it. It's really no big deal. Most people are just harmless and curious. They just want to see what you're up to. I don't know why. China spent most of the 20th century closed off to foreigners, so foreigners are still relatively new. The older generations, especially, have not. They don't watch American TV shows, and seeing a foreigner is pretty rare for them. So get ready for some staring. Also, the language barrier is huge, especially if you get outside of the major cities. The older generation speaks almost no English at all. The young generation all has studied English for years, but their speaking and listening ability in English is minimal. Besides that, there's a lot of weird, quirky stuff that it kind of takes some getting used to, like peeing in public. It's pretty normal for grown men to just start pissing in public. It's even more common for little kids just to piss on the sidewalk. Or maybe their grandparents will cradle them over a trash can while they drop a deuce. It gets a little weird, but just kind of another thing you got to get used to. Just the way it's done around here, I guess. If nothing else, the cultural differences here are very, very interesting, and you will have a lot of stories to write home about. The fourth thing you're going to need to think about before moving to China is health and safety. Now, in terms of violent crime, China is incredibly safe. No one's going to mess with you. Don't worry about it. Nobody has a gun, which means you're not going to get shot, which is cool. The only trouble you're going to get into is if you start picking fights with other people, which I do not advise you to do because that can land you in some big trouble. If you don't mess with other people, no one's going to mess with you. Don't worry about it. As far as safety, the biggest thing you probably have to look out for is traffic. There's cars and electric bikes just driving everywhere. No one seems to pay attention to the rules. People blow through stoplights. People are driving up on the sidewalks, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So you got to keep your head on a swivel when you're walking around. And if you're in a car, I suggest you wear a seatbelt if you can find one. They don't always have seatbelts in all the cars. So beware of that. I've never had a problem so far, knock on wood, but I'm sure you'll be okay. Now, as far as health, there's a lot of food safety issues in China. I've never encountered anything too serious myself. Knock on wood again. I've had some small cases of food poisoning, but nothing too serious. Another huge thing is the air pollution. If you have really bad asthma, China could be pretty rough for you. The air pollution, especially in the north of the country, is terrible in the wintertime. So I'm from California's Central Valley, where we get some of the worst fog in the whole United States. And I would compare the air pollution in China to the fog in Fresno, where I'm from. It's pretty bad. So yeah, if you have severe asthma and you still want to come to China, I would suggest you move to the south, move as far south as possible, maybe Shenzhen or Guangzhou. They're still going to be polluted, but the air pollution will not be quite as bad as it is in Shanghai or Beijing, especially Beijing. Beijing is terrible. Also, if you have any chronic medical issues, China has the most expensive healthcare in all of Asia. If you have to go to the doctor regularly, it could get pretty expensive. The fifth thing you're going to have to think about before moving to China is, where in China do you want to live? Now, China's a huge country. It's about the same size as the United States, so there are variations in terms of climate and culture and other things like that. So let me try to break it down a little bit for you. First thing you want to think about, do you want to live in a tier 1 city? That means like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen. Those cities are outstanding. They are some of the best cities in the world. You can get food from around the world. The transportation is amazing. They have subway systems or metro systems, whatever you want to call them. You can get anywhere in the city easily and safely. There's a ton of jobs in these big cities, and a lot of the jobs are very high paying. The downside is, if you are in a bigger city, it's pretty easy to get caught up in the expat bubble. You can find yourself eating only international foods and hanging out only with other expats, and maybe you'll miss some of the real local experience that China has to offer. Now, if you're a little more brave, you can go outside of the major cities. It's rare to find English speakers. The farther out of the city you go, the more difficult it will be to find international foods. So you better like Chinese food if you want to live outside of the tier 1 cities, because that's basically what there is to eat. And although a lot of places do have Western food, it's really Chinese style Western food. So I prefer the Chinese food over Chinese style Western food myself. And I'm pretty sure you will too. Once you decide whether you want to live in a major tier 1 city or a smaller city, or if you're just crazy and you want to live way out in a village somewhere, go for it. But after that, you're probably going to want to think about if you want to live in the north of China or the south of China or western China or wherever. In the northeast, the winters are cold and brutal. So if you don't like cold, I wouldn't live up north. Even as far down as Shanghai, Shanghai has pretty cold winters. It's part of the south, but it's just wet and cold all winter. So if you don't like cold, I would suggest moving down to like a place like Guangzhou or Shenzhen, or one of my favorite cities in China is Kunming, and they call it the spring city because basically the weather is like spring all year long. It can get a little cold sometimes, but most days are sunny and warm, so that's pretty great. Okay, the sixth and final thing to really think about before you move to China is, do you want to make a change in your life? Do you want to experience something new and different? If you move to China, you will definitely experience something new. No matter what, it's going to be an experience that you'll remember for your entire life. It'll change your life. It'll make you find out who you really are, who you really want to be. Being outside of your comfort zone for any extended period of time, I think, is one of the best things you could do in life to really improve like your outlook on life. Since moving to China, my life is quite a bit different than it used to be. I feel like I've grown as a person like exponentially since I've been here. I've learned how to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations, and I've learned how to just try new things. If you're outside of your comfort zone, you begin to be able to think outside the box a little more. If you're a business-minded person, this can be awesome for your personal development, because once you go out of your bubble and see the world in a different light, and then you get back into your bubble, you can bring all kinds of new ideas, and you can really try to change the world for the better, I think. So yeah, if you want to make a change in your life, come to China. It'll change you, for sure. So after everything I said, maybe you are a picky eater, maybe you do have some asthma, but If you want to make a change, I say go for it. Alright guys, that about wraps up my video for the top 6 things to think about before moving to China. I really hope it helps you out when you're thinking about moving over here. I hope this was informative for you. If you liked my video, please give me a thumbs up. Feel free to leave any questions, comments, or concerns about moving to China down in the comment section below, and I will do my best to answer you. Thank you so much for watching. I will be posting more videos in the future. You can also check out my blog, chinaexpatlife.com, for more information. I'll leave the link below, and I hope to see you in China someday. All right, thanks a lot, guys. See ya.